Welcome to How to Protect Your Real Estate Business from Cybercrime. This is part 1 of 2. This training is brought to you by Secure Exchange, Aon Australia and REIV. In part 1, we'll cover what payment redirection fraud is, how it works, and how it can affect your real estate business from payment redirection fraud. Then we'll provide the top 3 technical security measures for protecting yourself and your real estate business. What is payment redirection fraud? Payment redirection fraud is a type of scam where organised criminals steal funds sent via bank transfers. In 2019, the ACCC Deputy Chair described the payment redirection fraud process as scammers hacking business email systems and impersonating the intended payment recipient. The scammers request changes to bank account details, so the business makes the payment to the scammer instead of the legitimate business. This diagram shows how the payment process normally proceeds. Under normal circumstances, the real estate business provides payment instructions to the client, and the client then proceeds to carry out these instructions. The payment is transferred to the intended recipient as expected. This diagram shows how payment redirection fraud takes place. The criminal uses their access to the real estate professional's email to modify the payment instructions before they reach the client. The client then proceeds to carry out these modified instructions, which ultimately results in the payment being transferred to the criminal instead of the original intended recipient. Payment redirection fraud is a type of attack. This is a subset of business email compromise. A few facts about business email compromise. According to the ACCC, the estimated cost to Australian business was $60 million in 2018. Small businesses with fewer than 20 staff were the most likely targets and accounted for over 75% of reported cases. Any organisation that accepts, directs, or pays funds via bank transfers is a potential target. In this next section, we will discuss the 3 phases of payment redirection fraud. Payment redirection fraud generally occurs in 3 phases. In Phase 1, the criminals gain access to the email of a real estate professional. Phase 2 is where the criminals wait for an opportunity to exploit, such as a high-value transaction. And Phase 3 is where they tamper with the payment instructions to hijack the transfer and steal the money. There are 3 common methods used to gain unauthorized access to an email account. The first is phishing. Phishing is a social engineering technique that attempts to trick victims into clicking on a web link or opening an email attachment. The aim is to get the victim to enter their login details on a fake login page or install a program without the victim's knowledge, which ultimately captures their login details. Phishing emails are carefully designed to look like they are from a trusted party, such as a vendor like Microsoft or an IT administrator. Here are 2 examples of phishing emails. Sometimes the email contains indicators that it is not genuine, such as this malicious email example on the left that looks like an undeliverable message notification. It looks genuine, except for the fact that a Send Again button has been added, which is not normally part of an undeliverable notification. Clicking on the button sends the victim to a fake Office 365 login page under the criminal's control, where the login details are captured when the victim enters them. The email may not necessarily contain any indicators that it is malicious at first glance, such as with the example on the right. The email advising the victim that a document has been shared with them looks exactly the same as a genuine email. However, what is not visible in the email is that the link has been modified to send the victim to a fake Office 365 login page. In the same manner as the first example, the website is under the criminal's control and the login details will be captured. Here are 2 examples of fake Office 365 login pages. They look very similar to the real Office 365 login page, except that the address at the top is not the Microsoft website. Fake login pages can be identified by carefully inspecting the URL in the URL bar. If there is any suspicion that the website address does not belong to Microsoft, the browser tab should be closed immediately and login credentials should not be entered on the page. At the time of recording this presentation, the URL for Office 365 starts with login.microsoftonline.com. It is good practice to be aware of and keep a record of the URL of any website that you need to log into on a regular basis. That way, if you receive a suspect email notification that you are not sure is genuine, you can simply enter the website address from your records directly into a web browser instead of clicking on a link in a suspect email. In the case of the examples presented, this will allow you to check if an email really was undeliverable or if a document was actually shared with you without the risk of clicking on a suspect link. Be aware that phishing campaigns do not exclusively use emails, such as the ones presented in the examples. They can use a number of formats, such as an email with a link claiming a response is urgently required, or threatening action if a response is not received by clicking on the link, or enticing the recipient to click with the promise of a benefit or reward for clicking. Phishing is also conducted over other channels such as SMS or phone calls. These methods all have the same goal of getting the recipient to click on a link that will ultimately capture their login and password. The second method used to gain unauthorized access to an email account is using the fact that people tend to reuse passwords across multiple websites. This can lead to passwords being revealed in the case of a data breach, where usernames and passwords are published on the internet for everyone to see. If your work email account password is the same as, or a slight variation of, a password that has been hacked and made available as part of a data breach, then the criminal can gain access to your email account. Lastly, the third method of gaining unauthorized access to an email account is the use of weak or easy-to-guess passwords. Criminals may be able to determine passwords that are short or not complex enough using freely available automated tools. Either way, criminals need to obtain your password one way or another before they can move on to the next phase of payment redirection fraud. If your practice is targeted by a criminal, they can easily find passwords associated with you or your employees, which have been exposed in a data breach, and use it to try and log into your email. Dropbox, LinkedIn, and the company Zynga, which make the mobile game Words with Friends, have all had data breaches in the past few years. Have I Been Pwned is a well-known website where you can check if your email address and password have been revealed as part of a public data breach. In the example provided, we can see that this person's email address has been breached on 9 sites, including Bitly and Dropbox. In Phase 2, once the criminal has logged in with the stolen credentials and has access to the account's emails, they will sit and wait for an opportunity to exploit. This phase can take weeks or even months before the criminal finds a suitable opportunity to act. Criminals can deploy simple or sophisticated techniques to look for high-value transactions, including automated search tools, email forwarding rules, or simply monitoring emails for opportunities to exploit. In Phase 3, the final step, the criminal uses their access to your email account to tamper with the contents of the emails, either intercepting an email and changing its contents, or sending an email to your client or colleague impersonating you. Details in payment instructions for a settlement or invoice are replaced with a BSB and account number under the criminal's control. The money is then paid by the victim into an account of the criminal's choosing, where it is quickly transferred overseas and becomes almost impossible to retrieve. Criminals do not require physical access to your office or devices to access your emails. Once they have your login and password, they can access your emails via webmail, even if your devices are switched off. In this next section, we will discuss how does payment redirection fraud affect my real estate business. Make no mistake, cybercriminals will try to defraud you and your clients. If recent examples are any indication, financial losses of a single incident can run into hundreds of thousands of dollars. Being a victim may mean financial losses to your agency or financial losses for your clients, which you are liable for. This may lead to professional negligence lawsuits and increased professional indemnity insurance premiums. If criminals gain access to your emails or computer, then you may have mandatory reporting obligations under the Privacy Act. Failing to report the breach of personal information or sensitive personal information could mean you are fined by the OAIC. According to a cybersecurity report, Australian businesses are the world's second biggest target for email fraud. Australian small businesses often do not have dedicated staff to manage technology, fail to get the right computer security advice, and underinvest in technology and cybersecurity. Real estate businesses are easy yet valuable targets for criminals. Even small suburban businesses can deal with financial transactions in the millions. They hold confidential information, such as personal information of clients, including 100-point ID check records, which are ideal for identity theft. Who are the perpetrators of payment redirection fraud? It's probably not who you think. People behind these scams are part of sophisticated, organized crime networks. Cybercrime is a serious criminal enterprise, which is more profitable than the drug trade. For a single successful fraud to occur, there may be at least 5 or 6 criminals involved. Each actor has their own specialized skill, such as creating phishing campaigns, finding mule accounts, or even specializing in conveyancing, where they use their deep understanding of the transaction process. There have been payment redirection fraud cases in New South Wales where scammers have impersonated solicitors in conveyancing transactions and asked for additional funds to be transferred directly to New South Wales Revenue due to a supposed miscalculation of stamp duty. Why is cybercrime so lucrative and attractive? Let's compare a bank robbery and cybercrime. In a bank robbery, your typical bank robber is unlikely to get away with more than $50,000 these days. The maximum jail term for an armed robbery is 14 years, without adding aggravating circumstances, such as weapons and assault, which could raise the maximum to 25 years. Compare that with the profit from cybercrime, like payment redirection fraud, where bank transfer transactions can be much larger than $100,000, and where the crime of fraud has a 10-year maximum jail term. Cybercrime is lower risk, higher reward, and has less consequences than bank robbery. The risk of being identified during a bank robbery is high, with smartphones and CCTV everywhere, which take high-resolution photos and videos. Then compound this with the problem of making a quick getaway in city traffic. With cybercrime, you don't have these problems. In fact, the perpetrators of these crimes are usually in faraway, hard-to-reach jurisdictions, such as China, India, or Nigeria. In most cases, many of these frauds are so common that they aren't even investigated by police if reported. They just don't have the time and resources. How to protect yourself and your real estate business from payment redirection fraud. In this section, we will cover 3 simple yet effective tools that you can use to lower your chances of becoming a victim of payment redirection fraud. These 3 tools are multi-factor authentication, password managers, and paid antivirus software. They are easy and low cost to implement, especially when compared to the potential losses. In the following slides, we will discuss each tool in detail. Please be aware that the techniques described help lower the chances of becoming a victim significantly, but cannot completely eliminate the risk of getting hacked or falling victim to payment redirection fraud. First and foremost, the most effective security measure against payment redirection fraud is multi-factor authentication. You may have heard of a popular subset that uses exactly 2 methods of authentication, called two-factor authentication. You are probably familiar with the 4 or 6-digit codes sent by SMS from your bank. Most Australian banks require you to enter a randomly generated code from your phone when you add a new payee or make a bank transfer. This is called multi-factor authentication, and this security feature is probably available on your work email as well. In short, multi-factor authentication protects your mailbox from the password-related security weaknesses discussed earlier, such as weak or breached passwords. If your password is somehow obtained by the criminals, they won't be able to log into your mailbox without the 6-digit code from your phone. This is why multi-factor authentication is a strong security measure. This is an example of how multi-factor authentication works. If you log into your Office 365 mailbox with your web browser and you have multi-factor authentication enabled, the login page will ask you to enter a 6-digit code sent via SMS. or generated by a code generator smartphone app. If you have the Authenticator smartphone app from Microsoft installed on your phone, you can simply tap an Approve button instead of typing the 6-digit code from the screen. In practice, the multi-factor authentication process is not obtrusive, as you only need to enter the 6-digit code infrequently. Office 365 only asks for the code if you are trying to log in from an unusual geographic location or a new web browser. This minor inconvenience provides a very effective layer of protection from payment redirection fraud. We recommend you enable multi-factor authentication on your Office 365 account and wherever else this security measure is also supported. The second tool to protect against payment redirection fraud is use of password managers, also known as password wallets. Because criminals rely on passwords leaked in data breaches to get access to your email account, you should use a different password for each website. That way, if one website is hacked and your password is made public, the criminals can't use the same password to log in elsewhere. You may ask, but if I sign up for accounts on hundreds of websites, how is it possible to remember a different password for each one? The answer is use a password manager. A password manager is a secure method of saving and accessing passwords. You only need to remember the one password to open the password manager to access all your passwords when logging into a website. Password managers usually come with the browser extensions, which will automatically fill in the username and password for you on a website you saved earlier. This makes the login process easy and secure. Another great feature of password managers is that they can cross-check your saved passwords with Have I Been Pwned, the password leak lookup service discussed earlier. If any of your passwords end up in a data breach, some password managers can alert you if your password was hacked on a website and needs to be changed. This is an example of a popular password manager called 1Password. The usernames and passwords are saved in a secure vault and then uploaded to the cloud in an encrypted format. This way, 1Password allows you to access your passwords from multiple devices, including your smartphone. The last tool to protect against payment redirection fraud is paid antivirus software. You should be aware that not every antivirus software is made equal. Similar to the difference between a cheap and an upscale wine, the bottle may look similar, but the quality of the wine itself can differ greatly. Antivirus software is similar. Better solutions offer protection from more sophisticated online threats. Paid products are specifically designed to protect small to mid-sized businesses from advanced threats, including ransomware and phishing, due to their more sophisticated antivirus detection engine. Without going into great technical detail, this is a list of business-grade antivirus software that has been rated as some of the best by an independent antivirus testing company. This concludes the content for part 1 of how to protect your real estate business from cybercrime. Here is a summary of what we've covered. We established that payment redirection fraud is tied to organized crime. Payment redirection fraud often involves a large network of highly specialized criminals. Real estate businesses in Australia are attractive targets to these criminals because of immature IT practices and the high-value transactions real estate businesses deal with. The real-life examples presented demonstrate that the financial loss of a single incident can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Lastly, 3 technical security measures were presented that real estate businesses can implement to help protect themselves from payment redirection fraud. This training is continued in part 2, where we will cover more advanced payment redirection fraud concepts, such as supply chain attacks, what to ask from your IT provider, and cyber insurance.